सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै।
May we be protected and nourished. May we work together with great strength. May our study be fruitful and enlightening. Let there be no quarrels among us. Om, peace, peace, peace. Namaskar. Welcome to the Interfaith University's introductory online study program in Practical Vedanta. I'm Dr. Patrick Horn, an initiated disciple in the spiritual lineage founded by Swami Vivekananda. This 10-part course explores the global history, core concepts, key texts, essential practices, and influential personalities of this ancient sacred philosophy. In this session of personalities, you will learn about the life and legacy of Narendra Nath Datta, known famously as Swami Vivekananda. The great soul known throughout the world as Swami Vivekananda was born as Narendra Nath Datta on January 12, 1863 in Calcutta. His grandfather was a lawyer who became a monk, and his father served as an attorney of the High Court and enjoyed reciting from the Bible. His mother had observed religious vows, fasted and prayed so that she might be blessed with a son who would bring honor to the family. She offered a special worship to Vireshwara Shiva, and one night she dreamt that this deity aroused himself from his meditation and agreed to be born as her son. Narendra grew up to be a sweet but restless boy. 2 nurses were necessary to keep his exuberant energy under control, and he was a great tease to his sisters. To quiet him, the mother often put his head under the cold water tap, repeating Shiva's name. She said, "I prayed to Shiva for a son, and he has sent me one of his demons." It was at her knee that Narendra Nath first heard the tales of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Narendra had a fascination for wandering monks. Whenever a sadhu came to the door, Narendra would be delighted and give him anything from the house as an offering. At school, he was the undisputed leader. When playing his favorite game of king and the court, he would assume the role of the monarch and assign to his friends the parts of the ministers, commander-in-chief, and other state officials. As Narendra grew into adolescence, his temperament changed. He became keen about intellectual matters, read serious books on history and literature, devoured newspapers, and attended public meetings. Music was his favorite pastime. In 1879, Narendra Nath entered the Presidency College of Calcutta for higher studies in philosophy and logic. After a year, he joined the General Assembly's Institute, later known as the Scottish Church College. It was from Principal Hasty, the professor of English literature, that Narendra first heard the name Sri Ramakrishna. It is not widely known that Narendra Nath, probably at the insistence of his father, earned the degree of Master Mason on May 20th, 1884. Such fraternal association was not uncommon for young men of his social position at that time. Freemasonry is the successor to the ancient mystery schools of the Western esoteric tradition. The 3 ranks of apprentice, fellow craft, and master give lessons in character transformation, civic duty, and classical philosophy, reconciled with theology in an exhaustive account of symbolism and religious myth. Naren was also associated with a popular movement of the Bengali Renaissance. In the early 19th century, Ram Mohan Roy denounced superstitious idolatry, advocated for Indian emancipation from foreign domination, and promoted social reforms aimed at empowering women and extending rights and opportunities to all classes of society. His exposition of human perfection according to Vedanta and translations of Vedic scriptures were popular in England and America. Unitarian Christians supported his religion of reason, not dependent on priestcraft or revelation, by sponsoring a missionary project that became the Brahmo Samaj, the House of God. According to the real estate trust deed, the property was dedicated to informal meetings without dogma, ritual, or hierarchy. Roy's successor, Narendra Tagore, established an educational program and required a declaration of belief in monism and ethical vows to join the group. The organization fragmented during the tenure of Keshab Chandra Sen, who introduced image worship, sacraments, recitations, and other ceremonies. He experimented with asceticism, communal living with disciples, and established a school for the study of comparative religion. He declared himself the prophet of a new dispensation and avatar of universal religion, an eclectic syncretism intended to resolve theological differences and unite all churches. His numerous critics mocked him as a foolish madman. Narendra Nath said, "But for Ramakrishna, I would have been a Brahmo missionary." In their first encounters, he was skeptical of Sri Ramakrishna and challenged the Kali temple priest's spiritual authority. But gradually, through sincere testing and powerful experience, his doubt was allayed. The master did not restrict Naren's liberty and sweetly instructed the young aspirant in religious wisdom. He asked the other disciples to accept him as their leader. Sri Ramakrishna informally initiated Swami Vivekananda and 11 others when he spontaneously gave them the ochre clothes that symbolize renunciation. Sometime around the middle of 1885, Sri Ramakrishna showed the first symptoms of a throat ailment that later was diagnosed as cancer. One day, the master, unable to speak even in a whisper, wrote on a piece of paper, "Narendra will teach loudly." The disciple demurred. Sri Ramakrishna replied, "But you must." Narendra and the other young disciples took charge of nursing Sri Ramakrishna. The disciples sadly watched the gradual wasting away of the master's physical frame. His body became a mere skeleton covered with skin. The suffering was intense, but he devoted his remaining energies to the training of the disciples, especially Narendra. On August 15th, 1886, he summoned Naren to his bedside and gave him last instructions, almost in a whisper. Sri Ramakrishna wanted Naren to look after the young disciples. "I leave them in your care," he said to him. "Love them intensely and see that they practice spiritual disciplines even after my death, and that they do not return home." The master's dying words were, "Naren, take care of the boys." A house was rented at Baranagar, midway between Calcutta and Dakshineshwar. Dreary and dilapidated, it was a building that had the reputation of being haunted. The young disciples swore an oath on Christmas Eve, 1886, and were happy to take refuge in the first monastery of the Ramakrishna order. At its center was the shrine room with a copper vessel containing the ashes of the master. Narendra Nath devoted himself heart and soul to the training of the young brother disciples. Narendra Nath left the abbey on a solitary pilgrimage. He met Pavari Baba, who would receive people from far and near, and when not engaged in meditation, he would talk to them from behind a wall. Narendra intended to become the student of the saint until he had silent dreams of Sri Ramakrishna for 21 days in a row. Narendra felt cramped in the monastery at Baranagar. The whole world now beckoned him to work. He mixed with all, today sleeping with pariahs in their huts, and tomorrow conversing on equal terms with maharajas, prime ministers, orthodox pundits, and liberal college professors. During these wandering days, he both learned and taught. The Swami one day had a symbolic dream in which he saw Sri Ramakrishna walking into the water of the ocean and beckoning him to follow. He also heard the authoritative word, go. He had the inspiration to travel to America and exchange the Vedanta for the financial, scientific, and technological means to uplift the poor of India. His friends earnestly encouraged him to go to the forthcoming Parliament of World's Religions. He gave his first public lecture, My Mission to the West, and devotees brought him money to make the trip. He received the blessing of Sarada Devi, Sri Ramakrishna's widow, and set sail on May 31st, 1893, with the name Swami Vivekananda, suggested by the Maharaj of Khetri. The ship steamed out of the harbor on the appointed day, and the Swami adjusted himself to life on board the ship. He found it a great nuisance to look after his suitcases, trunk, and wardrobe. His orange robe aroused the curiosity of many fellow passengers who were soon impressed by his serious nature and deep scholarship. The vessel paused at various ports on the way. He was much interested at the sight of the various remains of Indian religious influences in Chinese and Japanese temples. In China, he found Sanskrit manuscripts, and in Japan, Sanskrit mantras written in old Bengali script. In fact, everywhere in China and Japan, his attention was attracted by all that might confirm his hypothesis of the religious influence of ancient India over the empires of the Far East and the spiritual unity of Asia. From Yokohama, the ship sailed on to Vancouver, from the old world to the new. Then toward the end of July, Swami Vivekananda traveled by train to Chicago, the destination of his journey and the meeting place of the Parliament of Religions. He went to the Information Bureau of the Columbian Exposition, where he learned that the Parliament would not commence until after the first week of September, that no one would be admitted as a delegate without proper references, and that even the time for being so admitted had expired. All this was an unexpected, rude shock to the Swami, for not one of his friends in India had taken the trouble to make any inquiries concerning the details of the Parliament. No one had known what were to be the dates of the meetings or the conditions of admission, nor had the Swami brought with him any letter of authority from a religious organization. Meanwhile, the purse that the Swami had carried from India was dwindling, for things were much more expensive in America than he or his friends had imagined. He did not have enough to maintain him in Chicago until September. Someone advised him to go to Boston, where the cost of living was cheaper, and in the train, his picturesque dress and regal appearance attracted a wealthy lady who resided in the suburbs of the city, Miss Kate Sanborn, who invited him to be her guest. His hostess was delighted to display to her inquisitive friends this strange curiosity from the Orient. Among these was J.H. Wright, a professor of Greek at Harvard University. The Swami was encouraged by Professor Wright to represent Hinduism in the Parliament of Religions. When the Swami said, however, that he had no credentials, The professor replied, "To ask you, Swami, for your credentials is like asking the sun about its right to shine." He wrote about the Swami to a number of important people connected with the parliament, especially to the chairman of the Committee on the Selection of Delegates, who was one of his friends, and said, "Here is a man more learned than all our learned professors put together." Professor Wright bought the Swami a railroad ticket to Chicago, but on his arrival, he found to his dismay that he had lost the address of the committee. He was lost and did not know where to go. Tired and helpless, he passed the chilly night in a big empty boxcar found in the railway freight yard. In the morning, he woke up smelling fresh water, to quote his own words, and he walked along the fashionable Lakeshore Drive, which was lined with the mansions of the wealthy, asking people the way to the Parliament grounds. But he was met with indifference. Hungry and weary, he knocked at several doors for food and was rudely treated by the servants. His soiled clothes and unshaven face gave him the appearance of a tramp. He sat down, exhausted, on the sidewalk. He was noticed from an opposite window. The mistress of the house sent for him and asked the Swami if he was a delegate to the Parliament of Religions. He told her of his difficulties. The lady, Mrs. George W. Hale, gave him breakfast and looked after his needs. When he had rested, she accompanied him to the offices of the Parliament and presented him to the president, who was one of her personal friends. On September 11th, 1893, a replica of the Liberty Bell rang out 10 times at what is now the Art Institute of Chicago to signal the opening of the Parliament of Religions, once for each of the major traditions represented: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Zoroastrianism, Taoism, Confucianism, Shintoism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The spacious hall was packed with 7,000 people. The official delegates marched in a grand procession to the platform, and in the center, in his scarlet robe, sat Cardinal Gibbons, the high priest of the Roman Catholic Church in the Western Hemisphere. He occupied a chair of state and opened the meeting with a prayer. The delegates arose one by one and read prepared speeches, but Swami Vivekananda was totally unprepared. He had never before addressed such an assembly. He was seized with stage fright and requested the chairman to call on him a little later. Several times he postponed the summons. Finally, bowing to Saraswati, the goddess of wisdom, he stepped toward the podium and addressed the audience as sisters and brothers of America. Instantly, thousands arose in their seats and gave him loud applause for a full 2 minutes. He said, "Sectarian bigotry and its horrible descendant, fanaticism, have long possessed this beautiful earth. They have filled the earth with violence, drenched it often and often with human blood, destroyed civilization, and sent whole nations to despair. Had it not been for these horrible demons, human society would be far more advanced than it is now. I fervently hope that the bell that tolled this morning in honor of this convention may be the death knell of all fanaticism, of all persecutions with the sword or with the pen, and of all uncharitable feelings between persons wending their way to the same goal." Swami Vivekananda spoke nearly a dozen times. The young, unknown monk of India was transformed overnight into a celebrated figure of the religious world. From obscurity, he leapt to fame. His life-size portraits were posted in the streets of Chicago with the words, "The Monk Vivekananda," written beneath them. Newspapers published his speeches, and they were read with warm interest all over the country. The New York Herald said he is undoubtedly the greatest figure in the Parliament of World's Religions. The Boston Evening Post said, "He is a great favorite at the Parliament from the grandeur of his sentiments and his appearance as well. If he merely crosses the platform, he is applauded." He was given aid by Dr. Merwin Marie Snell, chief of the Parliament's scientific section at the World's Fair and founder of the enigmatic Mahachakra Society. He wrote letters to newspapers exalting the Swami's preaching and popularity. He said he was received with greater enthusiasm than any other speaker, Christian or pagan. The people thronged about him wherever he went and hung with eagerness on his every word. He was also assisted by the Grand Master of Freemasonry, George Cooper Connor, who vouched for the Swami's Masonic degree and exhorted the fraternity to extend a cordial welcome. His first lectures beyond the Parliament were hosted at the Masonic Temple in Chicago, then the tallest building in the world. He was given hospitality in the homes of the wealthy. He embarked on a whirlwind lecture tour organized by a speakers bureau. He visited, among other places, Iowa City, Des Moines, Memphis, Indianapolis, Minneapolis, Detroit, Buffalo, Hartford, Boston, Cambridge, New York, Baltimore, and Washington. It is not true that he met everywhere with favorable opinions. He was outspoken and aroused the hatred of fanatics. They began to vilify him openly and in private, and they vindictively attempted to injure his reputation with false reports in the newspapers. He also discovered that the lecture bureau was exploiting him. Further, he did not like its method of advertisement. He was treated as if he were the chief attraction of a circus. The Swami felt disgusted at being treated like an elephant in a show. Swami Vivekananda became sick of what he termed the nonsense of public life and newspaper blazoning. So he severed his relationship with the Bureau and arranged his talks himself. He faced many difficulties in launching his missionary work, including slanderous accusations by jealous Christian ministers and active opposition from the Theosophical Society, who were also represented at the Parliament of Religions. When Swami Vivekananda, in desperation, sought their help, the president refused support and commented, "The devil is going to die and our cause is safe." Swami Vivekananda was unperturbed by such resistance. He accepted invitations from churches, clubs, and private gatherings. People came in hundreds and in thousands, and what an assorted audience he faced. There came to his meetings professors from universities, ladies of fine breeding, seekers of truth, and devotees of God with childlike faith. But also with these were charlatans, curiosity seekers, and vagabonds. The Swami gained sincere admirers and devotees among the Americans who looked after his comforts, gave him money when he lacked it, and followed his instructions. Once Vivekananda was invited to a dinner party by an eminent lady. During the meal, they were all talking and talking about cabbages and kings. It had nothing to do with spirituality. They were in the seventh heaven of worldly talk. The hostess came and asked everyone, "Now, would you like to have a cup of coffee?" Vivekananda used to drink tea sometimes 20 times a day. He also drank coffee a few times. On this day, they were served coffee. Everybody started drinking it. As soon as Vivekananda lifted the cup to his mouth, he vividly saw his master, Sri Ramakrishna, who said to him, "Narendra, stop, stop. There is poison inside your cup." The fanatics had bribed the cook to put poison inside Vivekananda's cup. Many others were drinking the coffee, and nothing happened. But Vivekananda's coffee was examined, and it was found to have poison inside. At the beginning of the winter of 1894, he returned to New York and accepted the invitation of the Brooklyn Ethical Association to deliver a series of lectures. He soon found a group of earnest souls who were seriously bent on following the guidance of the Swami for spiritual enlightenment. The Swami gave his whole time to teaching by means of talks and classes, and every day instructed this band of chosen followers in the exercise of the double method of Raja Yoga and Jnana Yoga. Many well-known people became his most intimate friends. Sarah Chapman Boole met Vivekananda in the spring of 1894. She was impressed by his depth of spiritual knowledge. In the summer of 1895, she invited Vivekananda to be her guest. She also invited her friend, Professor William James, to meet Vivekananda. They had long conversations many times. She was very generous. Josephine MacLeod was 35 years old when she met Swami Vivekananda and called him our prophet. She did not like anyone addressing her as his disciple and would immediately retort that she was his friend. When she was in London, when Vivekananda was also lecturing there in 1896, the best fruit of every season was delivered to him from an anonymous benefactor. Pineapple, a rare fruit in England, was delivered to him every day. She accompanied him to India and sponsored missionary work. The inventor Nikola Tesla learned of Vedantic cosmology from Swami Vivekananda and attempted to give a mathematical demonstration. John D. Rockefeller inaugurated philanthropic work after a command by Swami Vivekananda. Many times he'd heard his friends talking about this extraordinary and wonderful Hindu monk who was staying with them. One day he entered the Swami's office, and much to his surprise, Swami Vivekananda told him that his duty was to do good to the world, which caused Rockefeller to donate a large sum of money for an institution dedicated to the public welfare. Members of the Theosophical Society organized several talks at their New York headquarters. Swami Vivekananda spoke at least twice on yoga and Vedanta. He also stayed for a brief time in their guest room. All through the year, the Swami's work was enormous. He was working intensely, lecturing both privately and publicly. He began to feel himself wearing out. Having almost exhausted himself by this uninterrupted work of classes and public lecturing, the Swami was now eagerly seeking a place of retreat where he could take some rest to calm his shattered nerves and train up a group of students for future action. Swami Vivekananda was offered a summer cottage at Thousand Island Park in New York, where he stayed for 7 weeks with 12 disciples. Some of his lectures were recorded by Miss Waldo, who had also taken dictation for Swami Vivekananda's teachings on Raja Yoga. The Swami also gave brahmacharya initiation to several people, including Sister Christine, who would later carry on missionary work in India. Leon Landsberg was a part-time lecturer for the Theosophical Society. He talked on the Kabbalah, the devil, and other subjects, including translating a text purported to record the lost years of Jesus in India. When he took sannyasin initiation from Vivekananda, who warned him to beware secret organizations, he was expelled from the group, and the American section president, William Q. Judge, accused Mr. Landberg publicly of playing at occultism and childishness. The Swami shared an apartment with him, but they separated after a few short months because Mr. Landsberg would complain about food and other petty annoyances. He attempted to preach on tour, but expected a stipend. He wrote a series of unflattering articles which ended the relationship. Swami Vivekananda later admitted that he had been a fool in demonstrating a samadhi trance to Mary Louise David, who called it the best lesson he ever gave her when he initiated her as a sannyasin. He paid her for French lessons and described her as a leader in the labor movement. In fact, she was known in her past life to Karl Marx, who called her a low-class schemer. After she was inconsiderate toward the Swami, whom she expected to pay her rent and other expenses, she defected to the Theosophical Society. The Swami also initiated the spiritualist leader Dr. J.C. Street as a sannyasin. He was already a popular lecturer and author of a book of esoteric wisdom. William Q. Judge wrote, "The book is thought by all well-informed theosophists to be a mass of foolishness, except where it contains pages stolen from other people's works, and that its author, insofar as he pretends to represent the Theosophical Society, is an impostor." Dr. Street also embarked on a lecture tour and drifted away from the Swami to make money as a crystal ball reader. Josiah John Goodwin was hired as a stenographer, and without his effort, most of Vivekananda's lectures would be lost in history. He accepted a salary only for basic subsistence. He accompanied the Swami to London and India, and when he died at the age of 27, Swami Vivekananda was visibly disturbed. He wrote in tribute, "Those who think they have been helped by any thought of mine ought to know that almost every word of it was published through the untiring and most unselfish exertions of Mr. Goodwin. In him I have lost a friend true as steel, a disciple of never-failing devotion." Swami Vivekananda stated a desire to build a temple universal, envisioned as a college of religious education and spiritual growth with branches in every major city. He said, "My idea is for autonomic, independent groups in different places. Let them work on their own account and do the best they can." In 1895, he explicitly rejected institutional procedures and hierarchy among his votaries. He said, "Each one is quite independent to teach, quite free to preach whatever he or she likes. Individuality is my motto. I have no ambition beyond training individuals up. I again repeat, I form no sect nor organization." He prescribed this model again in 1896. He said, "As to the teaching part, my friends will go over this country from place to place, each one independent, and let them form independent circles." However, he insisted on promoting principles, not personalities. He prioritized meditation, study, altruistic work, and character building. He warned against rituals and severe austerities. Swami Vivekananda turned down offers of the chair of Oriental philosophy at Harvard University and at Columbia University, the chair of Sanskrit. He established a business structure to schedule classes and lectures, advertise, publish pamphlets and books, manage property and assets in New York in 1894, and in 1896, he appointed Francis Leggett to be the president of the Vedanta Society. They traveled together to Europe. Ms. Henrietta Mueller invited Swami Vivekananda to London. She first heard him speak at the Parliament of Religions, which she attended as a member of the Theosophical Society. She edited a number of his books. She also donated the money so Swami Vivekananda could establish the Ramakrishna Order headquarters at Belar Math in India. She later split from the Swami and wrote disparaging articles about him because she was of the opinion that no spiritual person ought to be ill. Mr. E.T. Sturdy was a theosophist who had been in the inner circle of Madame Blavatsky's esoteric section. He was an ascetic Sanskrit scholar who hosted Swami Vivekananda while in London and took the lead in conducting classes. He worked with the Swami to produce an English translation of the Narada Bhakti Sutra, but he quarreled about the publishing business. Mr. Sturdy became condescending toward the Swami, blaming his illness on smoking and unrestrained appetite, and rejected his brother monks. Swami Vivekananda wrote to him, "I am sorry we could not come up to your ideal." Despite antagonism by some theosophists, Swamiji met Annie Besant for tea in London. She praised him as a lion and proposed friendship between their organizations. Swami Vivekananda said, "I do not want to quarrel with the Theosophists." Mrs. Annie Besant invited me to speak at her lodge on Bhakti. I lectured there one night. Colonel Alcott also was there. I did it to show my sympathy for all sects. A devout Christian from youth, Miss Margaret Elizabeth Noble embarked upon a long and winding quest for truth. It was on this spiritual and intellectual quest that she discovered the teachings of Buddhism. In 1895, she met Swami Vivekananda in London, and he saw her potential as a great educator. He initiated her as Sister Nivedita, and she accompanied him to India, where she met Sri Ramakrishna's widow, traveled extensively, and established a school for girls in Calcutta. She dedicated herself to relief work during the epidemic of 1899, which killed 10 million people. She would often refer to Swami Vivekananda as the King. It should be apparent that the Swami worked under great pressure, a fraction of which a lesser person would have collapsed in no time. Naturally, he spent his few spare moments in fun and joking. He said, "I have been asked many times, why do you laugh so much and make so many jokes? I become serious sometimes when I have a stomach ache." The Swami taught, the first sign that you are becoming religious is that you are becoming cheerful. It is the cheerful mind that is persevering. It is the strong mind that hews its way through 1,000 difficulties. One of the memorable events during the Swami's stay in London was his meeting with Max Muller of Oxford University at his residence by special invitation. The professor was anxious to know from the Swami more than what he had already gathered about Sri Ramakrishna, and told him that he would be glad to write a larger and fuller account of his master's life and teachings. Exhausted with the strenuous exertions of his London work, the Swami accepted the invitation to tour the European continent. While he was in the Alps, he first conceived the plan of founding a silent retreat in the Himalayas as a monastery where his Western and Eastern disciples might be united. This would become the Advaita Ashram. He visited Rome and spent Christmas at St. Peter's Catholic Church. Later, as he sailed in the Mediterranean, he had a memorable dream of a man who told him that Christianity originated with the Therapeutae, which some scholars translate as sons of the Buddhist elders. During the voyage, he reflected on his work of the past 3 years and felt the urge to return to India. He was welcomed back to his homeland as a conquering hero, with long processions of huge crowds through triumphal arches. While speaking about his experience, he called out the Theosophists who attempted to injure his campaign. He said, "There have been certain circumstances growing around me, tending to thwart me, oppose my progress, and crush me out of existence if they could. Thank God they have failed, as such attempts will always fail. But there has been, for the last 3 years, a certain amount of misunderstanding, and so long as I was in foreign lands, I held my peace and did not even speak one word. There is a report going round that the Theosophists helped the little achievements of mine in America and England. I have to tell you plainly that every word of it is wrong. Every word of it is untrue. I arrived in America several months before the Parliament of Religions began. The money I had with me was little, and it was soon spent. Winter approached, and I had only thin summer clothes. I did not know what to do in that cold, dreary climate, for if I went to beg in the streets, the result would have been that I would have been sent to jail. There I was with the last few dollars in my pocket. This came to be known to the Theosophists, and one of them wrote, "Now the devil is going to die. God bless us all." Was that paving the way for me? For 3 years, I have not opened my lips about these things. Silence has been my motto, but today the thing has come out. After I had got name and fame at the Parliament of Religions, Then came tremendous work for me, but at every turn, the Theosophists tried to cry me down. Theosophists were advised not to come and hear my lectures, for thereby they would lose all sympathy of the society, because the laws of the esoteric section declare that to join the esoteric section means to surrender one's independence. Some stray remarks were also found among his papers. He wrote, "The Theosophists claim to possess the original divine knowledge of the universe. We are glad to learn of it, and gladder still that they mean to keep it rigorously a secret. We, on our part, see nothing but good in theosophy, good in what is directly beneficial, good in what is pernicious, as they say, indirectly good, as we say, the intimate geographical knowledge of various heavens and other places and the denizens thereof. We have no wish to disparage the good work of the Theosophical or any other society. The only help the religion of the Hindus got from the Theosophists in the West was not a ready field, but years of uphill work necessitated by Theosophical sleight of hand methods. The Theosophists wanted to crawl into the heart of Western society. Vivekananda toured throughout India delivering lectures to an enthusiastic reception. During his train travels, people often sat on the rails to force the train to stop so they could hear him. He repeatedly addressed social issues, uplifting the people, eliminating the caste system, promoting science and industrialization, addressing widespread poverty, and ending colonial rule. Meanwhile, the Ramakrishna Brotherhood relocated to a different building in Alambazar and learned of his achievements through newspaper articles. Some of his fellow monks disapproved of the reports from America, but they ceased ridicule when Swamiji wrote letters expressing faith in their guru, explaining his plan of campaign, and directing the monastic order. When he returned in 1897, he proposed a formal association and acquired land in 1898 for construction of a temple and institutional headquarters. Two legal structures were established. First, the Ramakrishna Math for the training and maintenance of Cenobites. Second, the Ramakrishna Mission for public education and social work. In the rules and regulations, Swamiji wrote, "Now the aim is to gradually develop this Math into an all-round university." He forbade severe austerities, promoted freedom of thought and action among different individuals with unique temperaments, and advocated for principles in action over personality worship and rituals. There was no process of conversion or homogeneous regimen. Several young men, inspired by the Swami, joined the order, eager to receive the monastic initiation formally from their great leader. His brother disciples expressed hesitation about one of them because of some incidences in his past life. This aroused Swami Vivekananda's emotion. "What is this?" he said. "If we shrink from sinners, who else will save them? Besides, the very fact that someone has taken refuge at the monastery and his desire to lead a better life shows that his intentions are good, and we must help him." A practical Vedantist, Swami Vivekananda wanted one and all to translate the Upanishadic doctrines into action in everyday life. The Swami himself practiced this ideal in his own life. He flung himself wholeheartedly into the whirlpool of activity and thus inspired others to follow in his footsteps and render service to the suffering humanity even under the most trying circumstances. One day, a young man complained to the Swami that he could not make progress in spiritual life. He had worshipped images, following the advice of one teacher, and had tried to make his mind void according to the instruction of another, but all had been fruitless. "Sir," the young man said, "I sit still in meditation, shutting the door of my room, and keep my eyes closed as long as I can, but I do not find peace of mind. Can you show me the way?" "My boy," replied the Swami in a voice full of loving sympathy, If you take my word, you will have, first of all, to open the door of your room and look around instead of closing your eyes. There are hundreds of poor and helpless people in your neighborhood. You have to serve them to the best of your ability. You will have to nurse and procure food and medicine for the sick. You will have to feed those who have nothing to eat. You will have to teach the ignorant. My advice to you is that if you want peace of mind, you shall have to serve others to the best of your ability. Swami Vivekananda found it most difficult to convert some of his own brother disciples to this concept of religion and its discipline and method. These brother disciples were eager for their personal salvation. They wanted to practice austerities and mortifications, enjoy peaceful meditation, and lead a quiet life of detachment from the world. To them, God was first, and next the world. At least that was the way they understood Sri Ramakrishna's teachings. The Swami emphasized that their duty was to serve others as the visible manifestations of God. He said that he wanted to create a new band of monks who would take not only the traditional vow of personal salvation, but also a new vow of service to humanity. Despite declining health, Vivekananda left for the West for a second time in 1899. Following a brief stay in England, he went to the United States. There he found his successor, Swami Abhedananda, actively engaged in the Vedantic work. He was gifted 160 acres of forest land near San Francisco, where the Shanti Ashrama was established later by Swami Turiyananda to train a select group of students in the monastic life. Swami Vivekananda said, "California is the place where Vedanta will grow." Swami Abhedananda prophesied, "There will be a spiritual wave starting in Los Angeles and San Diego, and from this coast it will inundate the world." There was an early attempt to establish a Vedanta society in Los Angeles and also Pasadena, where Swami Vivekananda gave many lectures, but alas, there was no good one to record them, and most of what he said was lost. Only a little has been preserved in the fragmentary notes of his disciples. After he arrived in San Francisco in 1900, he gave over 61 talks. His first lecture was at Golden Gate Hall on the ideal of a universal religion. He stayed at the Home of Truth with smoking privileges until a flat was rented on Turk Street where he could give classes and private interviews. Sometimes, after giving a lecture, the Swami was in the mood for ice cream, and a group of devotees would accompany him to a nearby ice cream parlor. He said that ice cream was food for the gods. He went to Marin County, where he, along with others, camped for 2 weeks. Although the weather on the whole was overcast and rainy, the Swami relaxed, free from public engagements and crowds of people. He meditated in the surrounding forest, chanted in the silence of the early morning hours, took quiet walks with his fellow campers, and chatted amicably with his companions throughout the day on a variety of topics. During his trip back to New York, across the American continent, the Swami was very much fatigued. He stopped in Chicago and Detroit. Next, he traveled to Paris for the Congress of Religions held on the occasion of the Universal Exposition. This Congress, compared with the Parliament of Religions in Chicago, was a rather tame affair. Swami Vivekananda, on account of his failing health, took part in only 2 sessions. He went on a sightseeing tour that included Egypt, Turkey, and Greece, and he may have suffered a heart attack in November 1900. In December 1900, he suddenly made plans to return to India. He said, "My body and mind are broken down. I need rest badly." Toward the end, he disentangled himself from the responsibilities in the order and began living a relaxed life surrounded by his pets, including a dog, goat, antelope, stork, cows, sheep, ducks, and geese. He continued to give classes and personal instructions to visitors. On his last day, Friday, the 4th of July, 1902, Vivekananda awoke early and went to the shrine for meditation. He was in a good mood at breakfast. Then he returned to the shrine to meditate. When he emerged, he said aloud, "If there were another Vivekananda, then he would have understood what this Vivekananda has done." He made arrangements for Kali worship the following day, then instructed his disciples to study and interpret scriptures. He went to lunch, claiming he was hungry enough to eat the cups and plates. Following a nap, he taught a class in the library and gave a warning. "If any man ever imitates me, kick him out. Do not imitate me." He took refreshments and a walk in the garden. He mentioned a plan to establish a college in the monastery to kill superstitions and spoke about the rise and fall of nations. He drank tea with the monks and expressed his concern for their material well-being. Then he went to his room to chant and meditate. He felt hot and received a foot massage. He seemed to fall asleep, but then he let out a little cry, trembled, and after a few deep breaths, died at 9:10 p.m. at age 39 years, 5 months, and 24 days, fulfilling his own prophecy, "I shall never see 40. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotir Gamaya Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om. Peace, peace, peace.